So importing costs really vary a lot on stage of the company. So I've seen companies who are flying in 10 pallets of goods from China by air, and it's like just burning cash. There's no use, there's no point in that. The first thing you want to do is move to shipping by sea. Sea is going to be cheaper than air if you've got more than, say, 4 pallets of goods. Once you're bringing it in, that's called less than container load, LCL. The next step up is a 20-foot container. You want to fill that, even if it's not quite full, let's say it's 80% full, that'll be cheaper than doing an LCL of 80%. It's also faster because the way it works if you do less than container load is it shows up at a warehouse and gets split, which takes time. Also, customs way more likely to open a mixed container than a full container. So you're going to get your goods quicker, significantly quicker if you do a full container. So that's a 20-foot container is the smallest container. The next one is the 40-foot container. That's the standard container. 40-foot container obviously holds twice as much, but does not cost nearly twice as much. It'll cost, let's say, 30% more. So if you can fill it, or again, even get close to filling it, say 70 or 80%, it pays to go to a 40-foot instead of a 20-foot. So that's just going to drive down your cost of the shipping in. The next part is your taxes and tariffs. There's 1,000 pages of government regulations as to what's every tariff code. Don't expect your freight forwarder to always get it right. So you want to do your own research, because the difference between the different tariff codes on things that are sort of vague can be, 7.5% of the low end and 33% on the high end. And that could be as subtle as, is something a yoga mat or like a home rollout mat? That's something I had. And the difference is one of those has 0 duties and one has duties. So you want to make sure you're classifying it correctly to minimize that cost. You also want to make sure that the price has to be the cost of the goods. It doesn't have to be the landed cost. So if your supplier gives you a delivered price for the goods, you still want them to separate that into cost to produce those goods and the cost of shipping. So you're paying the tariffs on the cost to produce the goods, not the all-in price, including the cost of shipping. You don't have to pay tariffs on that, but if you show it that way, they're going to charge you that way. One thing we do that's more in my e-commerce business, which is a bit more advanced, is something called Section 321, which allows you to import goods under $800 into the US with 0 taxes. So it's less than $800 per day per customer. So the way we do that is we import some of our bags. So bags have very high tariffs. It's got like the additional 25% tariffs from China that were put on. So you end up paying like 40% tariffs on them. So we import them into Canada, and then from our Canadian warehouse, we ship through ShipHero Fulfillment 1 box at a time into the US, and each box is under $800. There's no tariffs or duties. Obviously, we're not actually shipping 1 box. It's a truck full of different boxes, but each one's for each customer. It's totally legal, it's totally fine. And there's 0 taxes due to either the end customer. So to them, it looks like it's shipped from Buffalo, New York, so they don't even know it's shipped from Canada. And they're not responsible for any taxes. And me as the business owner, I don't pay any taxes either, because while it's shipped into Canada, it exports to the US. So I'm not responsible for Canadian duties, and I'm not responsible for US duties because it's less than $800. So again, totally legal. And if you have a high tariff item, significant savings, saves me over $10 on each bag. Which makes the economics work. If I had to pay that, it sort of wouldn't be worth selling the product. And that's how, if you notice merchants selling like Wish.com or AliExpress, who are shipping stuff into the US directly from China, they're using that same Section 321. That's why it's tax-free. They're not paying duties, and neither are you. A lot of disadvantages shipping direct from China. It's slower. It's the biggest one. So using Canada for 321 or Mexico for 321 is super popular. A lot of large brands do it. If you notice your product having origin in either Buffalo, New York, or Southern California, it's actually often 321, which trucks it right over the border and then hands it off to UPS, FedEx, USPS, etc., right over the border. So we do that out of Toronto and Vancouver as part of ShipHero Fulfillment. And there's plenty of other 3PLs that do it as well, both out of Canada and out of Mexico. So it's a more advanced way to save on tariffs and duties if you have say over $100,000 a year of tariffs and duties, and that they're a high percentage. So typically only makes sense if it's over $3 a package that you're paying. The free trade agreements, when they come into place, are also a great way to get either low or zero tariffs on importing. The other issue with those non-traditional importing lanes is there's boats from the major ports in China to the major ports in North America leaving weekly, versus if you're going to, let's say, get it from Costa Rica to California, the odds of there might be once a month where there's a boat going, and it might take a month or two because there are multiple stops along the way. So you got to make sure that there's a real supply lane doing the route you want. Otherwise, you'll save on importing, but you lose on shipping time and shipping costs, and it won't be worth it. So when you fly a product, it typically takes only about 2 days to get to the destination. When you're shipping by boat, there's the time from the factory to the port, then there's the on the water, and then there's from the receiving port to you. So most of the warehouses are somewhat near a port, so usually that's only a couple of days. Then typically they'll wait about a week to get on a boat and get loaded. From China to LA or Long Beach, the two main West Coast US ports, it's only about 3 weeks. And then there's not really any delays right now. There were obviously in the past. There's not really a lot of delays right now. So you're only looking at a couple of days from there to get to either like a Vegas or Southern California warehouse. If it needs to move across the country to the East Coast, it'll typically take about another 5 days. So all in, it's only about 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks, worst case, if you're shipping a full container. Shipping less than a container, you want to add about a week or so to that, or a bit more. If you want to go to the East Coast, being that there's land in the way, coming from China, it'll typically go through the Panama Canal and then come up the East Coast. So that'll add about a week or 10 days. The faster route is to ship it into LA and then truck it or put it on a train across country. The problem is that's more money. So the cheaper route is go through the canal. The faster route, it's called the land bridge, but it's basically just trucks across the interstate. So those are the usual times. Every once in a while, you will get a container held by customs, which will add 2 to 4 weeks, but it's super rare. It's like 1 or 2% that really get that sort of deep exam if you're doing a full container. If you're doing less than a full container, it'll happen maybe 5% of the time. So there's other routes. Obviously, not everything comes from China. So for example, if you're manufacturing in India or Pakistan, which are very large exporters of textiles, you'll typically want to export it to the East Coast because same way as just sort of the geography of the world, right? So shipping to the East Coast is way faster and cheaper from Pakistan or India, and obviously from Europe or the UK if you were going out manufacturing there, than trying to get to the West Coast. So it's the same thing as China, just in reverse.